It's Doug Oster from Everybody Gardens in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and you're listening to the Wisconsin Vegetable Gardener Radio Show, and all your dreams will come true. Not really, but you'll learn to garden.
Holly, let's go to the Ivy Organics 3-in-1 Plant Guard Hotline and bring in our next guest.
Marie Viljoen is a writer, forager, author, cook, and gardener. She resides in Brooklyn, New York, and has a very productive urban garden. She's actually originally from South Africa. Welcome to the program, Marie.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for taking time out of your day to join not only Holly and myself, but all of our listeners and enlighten us with a little more of your wisdom.
I hope I have some wisdom to offer you.
Well, your blog's name is 66 Square Feet, which has a unique story and as to why. Would you share that with us, how you came up with that story or that title for your blog?
That's an easy thing to do. My blog is based on the size of my very first terrace in Brooklyn, New York. And its footprint was exactly 66 square feet large and small. And when I was starting to write a blog, I had no idea what to call it. So I thought, it's going to be about gardening. It's going to be about small spaces. Let me just name it for the size of my little terrace.
Well, that's definitely a fun story. Now, since you're such an urban garden expert, what are some essentials that you feel to an urban garden versus something that you can buy from a farmer's market in regards to an edible plant?
That's quite a difficult question to answer because it depends on who you are, what your tastes are, what you like to cook, what you like to eat. I live in New York City, so we have a very particular climate. We have very cold winters, very humid summers. What I like to grow that's a little unusual is subtropical plants that are edible. And they go outside in the summertime, but they have to overwinter indoors. So one of them is a Thai lime. It's also known as makrut. Many people might know it as a kaffir lime, but this is a name I'm trying to discourage. The K word in South Africa, which is where I'm from, is very similar to the N word in the United States. So this lime can easily be called Thai lime or makrut, and it's delicious. Very, very aromatic, and it's amazing to just be able to walk out onto my terrace and pick this fresh fruit.
Now, with bringing the plant in and out during the winter, how cautious do you have to be about the transition period between in and out?
I'm pretty laid back about it. My basic rule of thumb is I bring them out in late springtime when the overnight temperatures are above 50 degrees Fahrenheit consistently, because the subtropicals and tropicals really don't like to be chilly. But I don't transition them gradually. They go from our really sunny bedroom straight out onto the terrace, and then they just have to get on with it. And then the same thing at the end of the season, usually in October, when the nights dip below 50 degrees Fahrenheit, I bring them indoors again.
So it's all temperature based on when it comes in and goes out and back in.
Pretty much.
Okay, so you are very much into foraging. This can be intimidating for a lot of people. How does one get into foraging?
Well, that's a hard question to answer because foraging is kind of something that's become really popular, and it's not something anyone used to define as foraging. I grew up going to hunt for mushrooms in the fall, for example. It's just something we did. We didn't say we were going foraging. So for me, now that foraging is kind of trending and it's got its own hashtags, my advice generally is, why do you want to get into foraging? Are you interested in wild foods, new flavors? If you're really intimidated about plant identification, it's a great idea to go with someone who is very good at identifying plants. They don't have to be a forager or into edible plants, but you have to learn to ID wild plants. And the best thing to do is start with the first plant you see. What is it? Is it a tree, a shrub, an annual? Learn the differences between those things. You can use a plant app. Picture This is a pretty good app. And then you need to cross-reference. Join a Facebook group online for plant identification or an edible wild plant group. And there are tons of books. There are really good books available that help you with plant identification, foraging field guides, and now recipe books as well. So there are all these resources. But the first thing you have to do is go outside. It's a little bit like gardening. You just have to be there. So go out, take a walk, and see what you find.
So what are your go-to foraging plants there in Brooklyn whenever you go out?
I don't really have go-to foraging plants. Every month is different. Every season, as you know, you're a gardener, has different plants. And what we find in Brooklyn is pretty much what we find all over the United States, depending on geographic region. So right now, we're in August, and what we're foraging at the moment is things like chokecherry, which is a species of aronia. Rose hips are in season, which are these amazing fruits that roses make. Elderberries are in season, so they're a great plant to forage if you want to make syrup to use through the winter and to ward off colds. There's a lot of stuff. Every month is different.
Okay, great. Now, you have two books. One is called Forage, Harvest, and Feast, and the other one is called 66 Square Feet. Can you tell us more about each of them, a synopsis, and maybe something fun or interesting about each of them?
Sure. Forage, Harvest, Feast, a wild-inspired cuisine, is my cookbook, which is totally dedicated to wild plants. It's a very detailed book about 36 of my favorite wild plants, and they range from edible weeds like dandelions and lamb's quarters to indigenous fruits like black cherry, wild black cherry, and pawpaw. And every chapter is about one plant, and then I have tons of recipes for each plant. I really wanted to write a book that gave people the confidence to use a new and unfamiliar ingredient, to show them really the range of that ingredient. So in the book, there is everything from cocktails and syrups and cordials and ferments to snacks, appetizers, soups, entrees, desserts. It's the whole thing. So that's Forage, Harvest, Feast, and Wild-Inspired Cuisine. And then my first book, 66 Square Feet, was pretty much based on that first little terrace. We're now 4 terraces later. We've moved. And it's a look at New York from the perspective of a gardener and a forager and someone who likes to shop at farmers markets. So 66 Square Feet, the book, is really designed to give readers an impression of New York City that most people do not have. I'm not writing about Times Square and Broadway and millions of people. I'm writing about gardening month to month, right from January through to December, and then shopping at farmers markets, what's available, and foraging and enjoying New York's green spaces with a menu, a full-on menu for every single month and chapter. So it has lots of recipes in it too.
Well, in the 66 Square Feet, many people, I'll categorize some people in that realm, think of New York as just being tall, high-rise buildings and a food desert. But there is a lot of individuals, such as yourself, that grew and grow in very small areas in the heart of the city.
Exactly, and I would think of New York as the absolute opposite of a food desert. I mean, there's the obvious thing, all the restaurants, but there are tons of farmers markets, probably more than in any city in the United States. And these farms are really quite close to the city. And then there are people like me who are just driven to grow food and plants on their little rooftops, on their terraces. And there are lots of community gardens as well. So in terms of green and growing and food, New York is actually a very exciting place to be. And I find that what draws people to the small spaces that I garden in is this surprise that you can actually grow food to eat in a small space. But it's so easy. You need containers, you need some kind of growing media or soil, and you need the plants. And the most important thing is you just need to begin. Buy one plant. If you're a cook, buy a thyme plant or a parsley plant and start tending that plant, looking after it, and you'll grow and acquire the confidence to grow these plants in super small spaces. Obviously, I'm not supporting myself completely from a very small terrace. But every day I cook, almost every day, and I walk straight out to the terrace, pick my herbs, pick my arugula from the window boxes, and it gives you a real sense of connection to the seasons, to real food. You know that it's grown organically if you're an organic gardener like I am. And it's fun. It gives you a lot of pleasure.
Well, that's fantastic. Now, where can we find out more about you and your blog and your books, etc.?
You can find me on Instagram at 66 square feet. The number is 66 square feet. I post there daily with lots of my forages or gardening adventures. The blog, it's probably the oldest blog in the world, but it's still there, 66squarefeet.blogspot.com. And if you're interested in exploring wild foods, Forage, Harvest, Feast, a wild-inspired cuisine is my latest book.
Well, we greatly appreciate you taking time to join us on the program and not only enlighten Holly and myself, but all of our listeners with your wisdom about small space gardening.
Well, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Well, absolutely.
For more information, please visit thewisconsinvegetablegardener.com.